We talked also with Glenn yesterday about how JD Vance is now getting attacked. Of course, he's going to be even worse than Trump. Trump, was he really a racist? But JD Vance is definitely a racist. He's an anti-Semite. He's associated with Tucker Carlson, who everybody knows is an anti-Semite and a Nazi. Mark Levin told me so. And they're trying to wrap that around JD Vance now because they're friends and he hasn't condemned Tucker. You're a long time waiting. He's never going to condemn Tucker. I hate to disappoint Tucker's critics. Mark my words, JD Vance will never condemn him because he's not a dick. He is going to stick by his friend. And I don't think JD Vance thinks that Tucker is an anti-Semite or believes any of the things that people are saying about him. And he's not going to say something he doesn't believe. Okay. But he is standing up, he's actively standing up for Tucker's son, Buckley Carlson. Now, there are two Buckley Carlsons. Tucker has a brother named Buckley, who I think is 2 years younger than he is. And then Tucker named his son Buckley. And that son is working for JD Vance in the comms shop. And because he's Tucker's son, he's now getting all this pressure on him. He's getting labeled like a bigot. It's crazy. The attacks on Buckley Carlson, which are totally unjustified, and they've just decided to pick on him and pretend he's got positions that he doesn't have and demand that someone speak out about it. It's like, what? So I'll give you an example. There is someone who calls herself a journalist who goes by Sloan Rackmuth, and she has decided to, according to JD Vance, he posted this, obsessively attack a staffer in his 20s in JD's office. He's talking about Buckley Carlson because JD goes on, she does not like the views of his father. JD goes on to write, every time I see a public attack on Buckley, it's a complete lie. And yes, I notice every person with an agenda who unfairly attacks a good guy who does a great job for me. Then this podcast host, Daniel Mail, responds with, Mr. Vice President, Sloan Rackmuth asked if Buckley Carlson, your employee, shares the same affinity for bigotry that his father does. How should we interpret your answer? This woman, Sloan Rackmuth, has been really going after Buckley Carlson as if he's the sitting vice president. It's very untoward and nasty. And JD goes on. This Sloan describes herself as a defender of Judeo-Christian values. Is it a Judeo-Christian value to lie about someone you don't know? Not in any church I ever spent time in. And then goes on to post this. I have an extraordinary tolerance for disagreements and criticisms from the various people in our coalition. But I'm a very loyal person, and I have zero tolerance for scumbags attacking my staff. And yes, everyone who I've seen attack Buckley with lies is a scumbag. So good for him. He's amazing. Taking on these online smear campaigns, you could argue it's beneath the dignity. I don't think so at all. I think it restores the dignity of the vice president's office. He's a young vice president. He knows that online does matter in some circles and it can drive narratives about people. And this is a totally innocent young man who's done nothing other than be born to someone the left hates. So good for the vice president for saying, you keep coming at me, you're going to hear from me.
And by the way, Buckley Carlson, he used to work for Jim Banks. He is being confused for his uncle, who has some fiery social media posts. But if you consider yourself a journalist, as the Sloan Rackmuth and others do, they immediately, it appeared a lot of people immediately conflated or confused his uncle for him, which is a very easy thing not to do. It just takes a little bit of Googling before you post and a little bit of verification before you post, if you say you're acting in a journalistic capacity. And nobody here in DC...
By the way, Emily, also because if you look up Buckley Carlson, the brother, his ex-bio is loving father, right, husband, the brother. Clearly Buckley Carlson, the younger, is all but a kid. He's in his young 20s. He just got out of college. He almost certainly would not have the description that the older Buckley Carlson has. It wouldn't take much to figure out there are two people by that name.
Right. And Buckley, the younger Buckley, worked for Jim Banks for a while. He's been in D.C. and nobody in conservative circles in D.C. has a bad word to say about Buckley Carlson. Everybody likes Buckley Carlson, who works for JD. In fact, that's how you end up working for the vice president, is that people think you're a good guy and they slot you into that role. So it's just completely ridiculous. And I think part of the reason Vice President Vance has stepped into the mix here is that he recognizes what this is actually about and is nipping it in the bud, because he recognizes that for years to come, as you said, Megyn, there's going to be a guilt by association drumbeat of attacks on Vice President Vance because of his relationship with Tucker Carlson. And that's what this is actually about at the end of the day.
So then we get Dave Rubin responding to JD Vance with a post that reads, "Mr. VP, I submit this respectfully. You're totally right. Nobody should be judged for their parents' words or actions. But, and I think you know this, the very people relentlessly attacking Jews now have Indians next up on the docket. And that includes your wife, even if she eventually converts to Christianity. So yes, Tucker can interview whoever he wants. His brother can post garbage memes all day. And his son, who may be just fine, can work for the vice president. But I think people are asking you to stand up when you see something evil. While I know you are trying to hold an increasingly fractured coalition together, you were elected to be a leader, not follow the whims of the trolls. And since they eventually will turn on your own family, at some point you might want to get ahead of it. Those are my 2 cents, and I'll continue to defend all the good things you and President Trump are doing. Something that this crew of people never do." What do you make of that one?
Unfortunate. I mean, really unfortunate. It's just the vice president has relationships with people, as every single person in the conservative movement does right now, by the way, who disagree with them on the issue that is Dave Rubin appears to be talking about right now, which is the question of Israel. And there are some people who believe criticism of Israel from Tucker Carlson's guests, and some people will say Tucker Carlson himself have flirted with open anti-Semitism. And then there are people who disagree with that. And, I obviously disagree with a lot of the overinflation of that label, because I think we learned over the last 10 years that when you inflate labels like racist and bigotry, when people are having good faith disagreements, you end up cheapening the word itself, which is rightfully stigmatized in the United States of America. We have fought, people have died to make bigotry something that is deeply stigmatized in the United States. And so I think people are allowed to disagree about that, of course, but people find themselves right now in these really fraught personal relationships that they're working out on their own behind the scenes. And it's obviously much more complicated when you're the vice president or when you're a public figure. But Dave Rubin knows that. Dave Rubin absolutely knows that. And I just think too often it becomes virtue signaling along the lines of the same thing that we saw over the last 10 years from the left. And I do feel like this post from Dave was a kind of verging on public virtue signal. And that is the stuff that's going to needlessly tear people apart.
Yeah, there's definitely a faction of the conservative right, that's the more neocon-y fashion, the more pro-Israel faction, that is turning into BLM 2020. I mean, that it's very alienating and it's very not conservative, and it's not going to serve anybody well. Not the right, not them. It's a pointless exercise, because most conservatives will recoil when faced with the choices of say it my way, rather than get on board. That is just not for us. It's just it's not how we've operated. It's not in our DNA. So yeah, I agree with you on that wholeheartedly. The other thing is, I don't understand what he's talking about. What do you mean? Not to follow the whims of the trolls? What does he mean? I think people are asking you to stand up when you see something evil. What is the evil thing? Is Tucker evil? Because I don't think JD Vance believes that, and he's not required to. You're talking about Fuentes. Here's something that's bothering me. I mentioned it yesterday. I didn't get to it. If he's implying that JD Vance hasn't said anything about Fuentes, he's wrong. Just as the New York Times, Jamel Bowie was wrong yesterday when he said that JD Vance refuses to condemn Nick Fuentes. He has condemned him. He doesn't spend all day, every day condemning Nick Fuentes. This guy is a podcaster, but he has done it. I remembered him doing it, and I actually asked my team to pull the clip, and here's at least one of them. I think he's done it repeatedly. Watch.
In your own movement, that's what I want to ask about, because one of the supremacists who was saying things like this about your family, Nick Fuentes, an avowed anti-Semite, went after your wife. He had previously dined at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. Does this have any room in your movement, in the MAGA movement.
Of course it doesn't have any room in the MAGA movement. And of course,
you disavow him and this.
And of course, Donald Trump has criticized this person. Look, I think the guy's a total loser. Certainly I disavow him. But if you ask me what I care more about, is it a person attacking me personally, or is it government policy that discriminates based on race? That's what I really worry about.
Disavow, total loser. That was as recently as August of 2024. What more is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to, as the vice president, like monitor daily the podcast, do a podcast in rebuttal? You know, it's really, let's face it, about his friendship with Tucker. That's what it's about.
That's 100% what it's about. And it's not, and even beyond that, it's about his willingness to engage with people like Tucker Carlson, who are pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable conservative Republican Party foreign policy, and to ask really deep questions about that. And listen, I actually completely understand, as someone who's been fairly critical of our relationship with Israel throughout the last couple of years, completely understand why the Jewish community in the United States of America is frightened by the growth of Fuentes's platform. I understand that. We are within the generation of people who lost family members in the Holocaust. There are living Holocaust survivors right now to this day, and they are very, very understandably sensitive, especially as the algorithm picks up on Fuentes' world and all of that and starts churning it out and pushing it in your feed and amplifying it. So completely understand the sensitivities, but it just in the same way that the right asked the left, people on the left, who, by the way, there are living survivors of Jim Crow, and there are people who are reasonably sensitive about racism in the United States, just as the right asked people on that side of this to be to act in good faith and to be judicious, as there were criticisms along the lines JD Vance just made about policies made in the name of affirmative action that were fully racist, and ideas coming out of people like Ibram X. Kendi that were fully racist, and Robin DiAngelo, just as the right was critical of the definition inflation of the last 10 years there. We should be demanding the exact same thing of our own side, because it only makes situations worse when you impugn people's motives by accusing them of being engaged in actual bigotry rather than good faith criticism. And if you genuinely believe that JD Vance falls into that category because Tucker Carlson did an interview you thought that was too soft with Nick Fuentes, despite the fact that in the middle of it, he did go in this back and forth with Fuentes about how blood guilt is not Christian. Now, I would have done the interview differently, but that part, I probably wouldn't have done the interview at all, actually, to be honest. But that part was actually pretty powerful, where he's debating Fuentes on ascribing blood guilt to people because of who they are. And that's not getting attached to JD Vance. I mean, it's just all so ridiculous.
My friend just lost her ring. She went to replace it. She realized it was a gold ring. The price of it has gone up like 25% since she bought the ring a year ago. That's because gold is on the march upward. And it is the one time of year that Birch Gold Group gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 purchased. Gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars, central banks are pulling from the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and military tension continues to build. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty, and if you are looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold, I say, with a qualifying purchase. Just text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and for a free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase will end on November 30th, so don't wait. Text MK to the number 989898 for full details. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.